Hi, Jacob. Hello.
Watch the type of movie from that category because it gives you the codes. I'll find them. I got it somewhere.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening, everybody.
Evening.
We're on page 96, volume 2.
What page are we on?
96.
96, Harold.
96. Thank you.
Unconventional tochein. Here's Abe. Okay, let's wait until some
Wait.
people sign up. Susie, pass me a napkin, please.
Don't give me the one with the bow in it.
No, we had it.
Hi, Jacob. You can hear now?
Yeah, Jacob is on.
But he can't hear.
Why can't he hear? Yes, he can hear. Here's Walter. Okay.
They took for a show to Israel.
Mhm.
Did he get back?
It's all ages.
We're on page 96.
Who we waiting for? Yaakov? Is Yaakov around?
Yaakov is-
Again.
No, he's going to change his computer because something's wrong with his sound.
Oh, okay. Because I saw him send a message or something. Oh, there he is.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
In 96, we're talking about grinding. We have mentioned several circumstances in which the prohibition of tochein may not apply. Another possible exception to the prohibition involves tochein performed with a shinui, a change, an unusual method. According to the Gemara Masechta Shabbos, tochein is entirely permitted when done with a shinui, although the Amoraim disagree as to the extent of the shinui necessary. Hani pilpali medik. If you have peppers, you want to crush them, chada chada, bekasa de sakina, with the handle of a knife, it's permitted. Shari. Tarti, usr. But you cannot crush two at a time. Rava Amar kiven de mishani afilu tuvanami. If you use the back of a knife, which is bichlal shinu, then it doesn't make a difference how many peppers you try to crush. In an earlier shiur, volume 17, we noted that when a malacha is performed with a shinui in an unusual way, it cannot be categorized as a volitional creative act, which constitutes a malacha midaraisa. However, as explained there, such an act normally remains forbidden midrabanan. Why then is it permitted here? This is explained by the Shibbolei Aleket in the name of the Rid, and later it's quoted by the Beis Yosef. The Ike de Kashale, somebody might have a problem. Even the Bedarko Chayiv Mishum Tochen. If you did it in the normal way, you'd be Chayiv for Tochen. Therefore, Yedei Shinu Potav also Levi. He's the Shibbolei Aleket is pointing out if you do something with the Shinu, it shouldn't be permitted. It should be Asr Min Rabbanan. So Kasa de Sakina, he says, using the back handle of a knife is Shinu Gomrahu, is a complete Shinui. The Ben Madach Shel Evan, the Madach Shel Eitz. Or, for example, when you do have a mortar and a pestle, you use a wooden one as opposed to a stone one. Heavy shinui. Kiditnan beper kamo de beitza. Katu de sakina havi shinui gomor. Using the back of a knife, it's a complete shinui. Hilkach mutar l'chatchila. So because of the extent of the shinui, it becomes not prohibited Mrabanan, but mutar. Kedaminon gabi borer benofer ukvorachai. We said by sorting, by borer, if you use a sieve, you're chayiv. Now, if you use a plate or a basket, which is a shinoi, then it's not that much of a shinoi, so it's potter of a losser. If you do the boirer biyad, avishinoi gomer mutar. So the Shibbolei Aleket has given us a yesod that if the shinoi is extreme from the normal mechanism, then instead of being potter of a losser, it's mutar l'chatchila. The Shibbolei Aleket observes that there are indeed two kinds of shinoi, and each has his own halacha. Often the discussion surrounding a shinoi pertains to a mild shinoi, whose execution is not dramatically different from the principle forbidden action. This is the case when a person grinds material with a pestle made of wood instead of one made of stone. You're still basically grinding. You're not using the classic, stone, but it's still wood. That action would be forbidden, Mrabaanan, but not Miraisa. But if one grinds materials with a knife's handle, it's so dramatically different from grinding with a pestle that it's considered a shinoi gamor, so the action is permitted entirely. So on the basis of the Rambam, the base Yosef writes that even using a knife handle, crushing peppercorns would still be forbidden if a person crushes in a mortar. So what he's saying is if you took the peppercorns, put it on a plate, and you used the knife handle, that would work. But if you put it in a mortar, like a mortar and pestle, one of those round bottom things, and then you use the back handle, that would still be potter of a losser. The Beis Yosef clarifies that we say you can crush peppers or peppercorns with the back of a knife, you can do it on a plate. But not in a mortar. Rav Yosef Karo in the Shulchan Orech rules similarly, that it's permitted to crush peppercorns if one uses a knife handle and a bowl. Muter lodoch pelpolin. It's permitted to crush peppers, afilu harbe yachad, even multiple peppers. V'hushi aduchem bekata shel sakin of the gar. You have to use the back handle of a knife and on a plate. The Mishmur explains that it's necessary to use a bowl instead of a mortar to ensure that the crushing does not appear to be, here comes that word again, uvda dechol, like a weekday activity, employing two changes, ensuring that it does not look like a weekday activity. We don't like using the back handle of a knife in a mortar. Even though the change is using the back handle, it's almost like a Marasayan thing. It's it looks like a weekday activity when you grind in a mortar and a pestle because you're using a mortar, even though you've changed one of the components. So if you grind peppercorns with the back handle of a knife on a plate or on a table, so that's two shinuyim. The element that you're using to crush and the element that you're crushing it on. That, the Mishnah Berurah says, takes it out of even a merzi ke'uvdedechol. So both according to the understanding of the Rid and that of the Rambam, it is sometimes permitted to mash and puree fruit on Shabbos when doing so with a shinui. And this is explicitly stated in the Tosefta that we cited above. Ein meraskin dvela v'gargoris v'charuvin. We don't mash figs or dates or kereb, old people who can't chew, with beyontiv. Ava merasek hu biyad shel sakin, but you can do it using the handle of a knife, ube eitz, or a wooden ladle. Ve'ena chosh is no problem at all. It's a tosefta based on this. Rav Moshe Feinstein writes in the conclusion of a tshuva that even according to Chazon Ish, there's a permitted way to mash a banana using a shinui. V'nei gam Chazon Ish matir sham b'shinui v'shinui kosov shu b'katet d'sakina or katet d'kafel maz. If you use the back handle of a knife or a spoon. V'lachein l'maisa mefshar lischok sheyet tov latinokos. Therefore, if you're mashing for babies, gam b'katet tov lasos ken latzeis gam shitas a Chazon Ish. You should do it this way on Shabbos to satisfy the requirement of the Chazon Ish. Chazon Ish writes that mashing a banana in this way constitutes a proper shinui, because the crushing with a handle must work harder to achieve the desired results than someone using a more conventional tool. Would this logic also permit mashing a banana with the tines of a fork as constituting a shinui? According to the Orech Shabbos, it's forbidden to mash fruit with the tines of a fork, as this is not considered a sufficient deviation from the normal. Avarisuk banana or avocado, mashing a banana or avocado, bishino amazlik, just with a fork, with the teeth of a fork, eino nechshav shinu v'areze osir. That would be prohibited. Abe, you might need to mute your thing. Thank you, because I think we can hear it in the background. Thank you. The Rav Ben Zion Abba Shol allows you to permits you to mash with the tines of a fork. He says it's a proper shina. Near La'aniyas Daitin, his humble opinion, the Marasik Peres Fiorokos B'Shinia Masleg, if he mashes fruit or vegetables with a fork, the shapir, it's a good shinoi. The normal way is to use a specialized utensil to mash bananas. Somebody who's mashing potatoes to make a puree, or chatzilim or banana you use the teeth of a fork to mash eggplant. Shapir dami vavishinu. So they consider that enough of a shin. What about tochein after tochein? We already had ein bishul achar bishul. Once something is cooked, you don't cook afterwards. We already ein afui after afui. Baking after baking, there's also no problem. Here, grinding something that's been ground already. So does the malach of tochen apply to crushing baked bread or other baked grain products? Grain comes from the ground and should be included, the Smak writes, that it's permitted to crumble bread. Because once flour has been ground, it can never be subject to the malach of tochen again. And this is cited by the Ran. You can crumble flakes of bread. I guess they fed them to the chickens, the tarnagolim. To give it to them right away. And they use this concept of no tchina after tchina. And the Ramah in the Shulchan Orech rules like this. Since bread has already been ground, when they ground the flour, ein toichin achar tochen. Some achronim have pointed, though, to a possible conflict between the Ramah's ruling and the ruling of the Shulchan Aruch elsewhere. The Shulchan Aruch cites an opinion which forbids scrubbing dried mud off clothing because of the malach of tochein. Although the mud itself is comprised of substances which have been broken down into tiny components and then become clumped together in a dry form. Tichal bigdo, if you have like mud on his garments, mishafshafo, you can scrub it off your garment. But v'yesh meforshim da'ani mililach, only if the mud is moist. Aval yavesh asur davi tochen. If it's dry, you can't do it because it's like grinding.
How can you do that on Shabbos? You can't clean on Shabbos.
You can scrub mud from your garment if it's moist.
I understand, but you're not allowed to. You have a little ketem on your shirt. You're not allowed to take it off on Shabbos, even if it's wet. You're not allowed to do that. I don't understand how you can take off mud. In other words, you're cleaning your garment.
You're not using, we didn't say you can use water
Mm.
or soap, or we're not laundering here. You have a piece of mud on your clothing, you can scrub it off, he said. And that's not, remember, laundry requires
Yeah,
water.
but what's scrubbing? What's scrubbing? Scrubbing is scrubbing.
That means you can take your finger and get rid of the piece of mud from your garment. That's what the Shulchan Aruch says.
I hear what you say, but that's okay.
And we'll see, your issues are gonna come in if, for example, you use water, you try to take a stain off, that hanami. We'll see, that you're right. But that's not what it's not what you're doing here. And he says it's only if it's moist. If it's dry, it's worse, because then you're grinding it off. And the Chazon Ish articulates, yes,
But it's grounded. It's not talking off the tochen. You're just flicking it off. So
So
it's why
that's-
you're flicking off.
so that's why they brought this as a kasha to the Ramah. The Ramah said, "Ein tochen achar tochen." So the Achronim brought this Shulchan Aruch that seems to be against the Ramah. He prohibits
Okay, yeah.
removing a dried thing from your garment. Walter saying, I ain't tochen achar tochen, but the Shulchan Aruch seems to say that's not a problem. You can have tochen achar tochen. That's the kasha. So the Chazon Ish articulates the parameters of the principle of what it means, no tochen after tochen, explaining the difference between what the Ramah said and what we just learned of the Shulchan Aruch. Hade ein tchina b'pas, hainu she'ein tochen ele b'hafroda shel chibur TV. Tochen doesn't apply to bread because tochen only applies to separating something which is naturally attached, right? You ground the wheat that's naturally attached, you have to grind it. Aval hafrada shel chiburei bnei adam. But if by separating things which have been attached by people is eino b'chlal tochen. Afilu b'chiber davar shelo nitcha me'olam. Like by putting a piece of mud on your garment, the garment the mud may have never been nitchan, but since now it's attached, now you're separating it, it's a problem. Elabala olam mefurad. It's been
How do you
separate.
get from separating to tochen? Grinding is grinding, separating is separating.
A number of other answers are given to this question as well. For example, the Eglei Tal explains that the principle of no tochen after tochen applies only to items that grow on the ground, but not the ground itself. So the ground itself, even though it might have been grinded, and now you're grinding it again, there is tchina after tchina. The Shvitat Shabbos suggests that the principle of ein tochen achar tochen applies only to cases where a difference remains between the original state and the state after being ground, such as with grain, where it is easier to crush or grind the second time, and where no difference exists between the two states, such as mud or dirt. Before you ground it, it was like that. Now you ground it, it's the same thing. So they're just trying to, there seems to be a steer between the Ramah and the Shulchan Aruch. I agree with Yaakov, it's hard to see how just separating a piece of mud from the garment has been considered tochen. Let's see what the Orech Shabbos says. Hine, afim lechas bishul. When it comes to cooking, matzina, we see a principle, ein bishul achar bishul. Amnan yesh chiluk, ben geder adin de ein tochen achar tochen, leben adin shel ein bishul achar bishul. There's a difference in the parameters about tochen after tochen versus bishul after bishul. The yesod, adin. Fundamentally, we say in bishul achar bishul mitzad melechas habishul harishon shenesta. When you initially cook the food, I'll give you an example. When you cook tomatoes, so there's a protein called lycopene in tomatoes. When you cook a tomato, you denature that protein. Proteins come, they're long strands of amino acids that are balled up with various bonds. When you cook it, When you heat it, you break all those bonds and it becomes like one long, that's a denatured protein. Once you cooked it, you've denatured it. It doesn't roll up in a ball anymore. I say this because, for example, there are a number of studies that show that prostate cancer can be prevented with people who eat cooked lycopene. So it's not eating raw tomatoes. It's eating tomatoes that have been cooked, like pasta sauce, marinara sauce, salsa, ketchup, cooked tomato products. So the act of bishul irreversibly, like think about an egg. You take a raw egg and you cook it. You can't reverse it. That's the law of thermodynamics. It's also has to do with entropy, with chaos, and it's more organized. So they understood this a little bit because the act of the initial bishul, that's the melechas bishul, v'yomavushal, shuven mevushal nosaf shei melacha. So by recooking it, the melacha that was originally done when you cooked the original thing, you can't do. It's not considered like you did a new melacha. However, b'melechas tochen, hager shona, the parameter is different. She'af she'ba'ofen shema'olam lo nasta kan lechas tchina. For example, let's say there had never been tchina before. It was, pieces of sand, separate, and then it gets wet. It's a piece of mud. If, for example, a person rolled it up in a ball, there, when a person attaches it, it's not an attachment. Then we say you can crumble bread. And we use this thing because there's no grinding after grinding. The root of the leniency is it's not the concept that, the malacha of grinding has already been done in making that lechem. No. The human action of putting together the dough, right, and baking it, doesn't create a chibur. Hainu, the flour was all crumbly. Human action, you added water, you kneaded it, and you baked it, and it becomes together. But it's not like a new chibur when it comes to the melach of tochen. We have to view the baked bread as if it's still crumbly. If the newly attachment is misalek legamri tamatzav hakodem, removes the former status, and it's like it was when it first created, then if you grind it, yesh mishum tochen. You have metal, and you grind it into metal dust. Let's say you melted it again and put it together again. It's one piece of metal again. Then there'll be a problem of tchina after tchina. Yesh ba mishum tochen. There is a chibur gomer. There's no way to look at that reconstituted piece of metal as if it's still crumbly. That's according to Orech Shabbos. If something has been ground or finely chopped and is subsequently artificially rejoined, such as a cake or a biscuit, it still can no longer be subject to the melach of tochein. But if something is naturally combined and is subsequently crumbled, such as mud or dirt that gets onto one's clothing, it may be subject to the melach of tochein if you grind it further. You're only if somehow by getting rid of the piece of mud on your shirt, you grind it, because that's how you get it off. So then there'll be tchina. If you can flick it off and you're not grinding it, then I don't think there'd be a problem.
I get it, but what's the basis of the belief that ein tochen acher tochen? I mean, okay, I understand what he's saying, but why is that so? Why is that if something has already crumbled and then been put together by human action, you can't have tochen again. Where does he learn it from?
So you can, so they just showed us that in certain situations, you can have tochen achar tochen. That
Well, in
means,
the metal, but that's truly, I guess, a molecular recombination. Or maybe not. I'm going too far. I'm not a chemist.
right, there's
I'm Harold's
the bread is viewed as if it's still crumbled.
Yeah,
When
right.
you
Yeah,
crumble it, you haven't done something new.
but you molded the bread. You put stuff in it to mold the bread again. It's a mold again. It binds. So there's a binding.
But
So that-
apparently it's not, it still can be viewed as pieces. And now that you,
I
it's
hear-
not a new thing. That's how they're resolving this apparent contradiction between the Ramon and the Shulchan Aruch. They're defending the Shulchan Aruch's opinion by making this chiluk in the parameter of Tchina.
we need a chemist here tonight who can tell us how the bounding took place. In other words, it's rebound again. It's hard to
I know,
understand.
but I do see the difference between taking
No,
flour,
no, metal.
making bread, and taking metal
No,
that
no,
have been combined and you put it together. Now it's a
100%.
piece of
That's a
metal again.
different. It's a different form, but so is the bread a different form. It's not flour anymore. The bread is a different form also. I hear what you're saying about
But it crumbles very easily, right? You take bread and you crumble it, certainly if it's stale. So in a sense, it okay.
That's a good answer, Ernie, that it's stale. But if you talk about fresh bread, it's not so easy.
Fresh bread is not so easy to crumble.
It turns back into like a doughy situation, and that doughy situation is bound.
Let's see what the Orech Shabbos says here. Mutter leforer pas. You're allowed to crumble bread, uga, cake, biscuit, chadome, the pirurim, into like let's say you have a child, and you want to feed him small pieces, you can do that. Ein bzech shash mlachas tochen, mishum she'ein tochen achar tochen. Amnam ein laso zo bekli amyuchad l'tchina, kigon pumpia v'chadome, like a grater. So you can do it, with your hand. You shouldn't use a kli to crumble it. Then it says mutter leforer glula, a pill, into la'avka. Let's say a person can't swallow a pill, a tablet, and you want to crumble it into powder. Ein b'zeh mishum tochen. So there's no tochen. Matam mishum shaglula asuya ma'avakash nidadka ve'ein tochen achar tochen. Same thing. The original pill was made by powder, which was clumped together. So by unclumping it, it's ein tchina achar tchina.
Is that really so? Is that how a pill is made? You have powder and it fuses it?
Press is very high pressure. With a
Yeah.
binder.
Is that right? Okay. 'Cause I could think of other ways it could be made. All right.
Well, a capsule's not made that way. It's like a tablet. Right. Osir lasir boats otit yeveshim shalabagodim. But again, following the Shulchan Aruch, you may not remove a piece of mud or clay that are dry from your garment. O hane'alim, or on your shoes. Mishum shasaratam krucha betchinat afar. By removing it, you are grinding some of the dirt. Uvemakom sheyesh b'davar mishum kavod abrius. However, it's not covered for a person to walk around with a big piece of mud on his garment. There's kavod abrius. Mutar lasiram al yedei amir l'nochri. You can ask a non-Jew to do it for you, because we're lenient for rabbinic in rabbinic law for kavod abrius. You can't violate a doraisa for kavod abrius, but amir l'nochri is a rabbinic law for kavod abrius. You're allowed to violate that. Occasionally, spices and other old potters may be clumped together over time. The Yalkut Yosef writes that breaking down such clusters presents no concern of tochen. Tabak haracha. I remember shuls that used to have snuff. The old man would have the snuff, right? Or I don't remember chewing tobacco, but I guess they had the spittoons there. In LA, maybe Yaakov Yellen in New York remember seeing that.
Oh, Beis Medrash Hagadol, where we went on the four corners of the bima, where the Sefer Torah was read, there were spittoons on every side,
I see.
and people went and spit into the spittoon. That's the way it worked.
They were chewing tobacco,
Yeah, or anything else. Yeah.
right? So here it is, tabak harachashin is yavesh. You have tobacco that's dried, and v'nasa ke'ein regavim. They're like clumps, medubakim, they're stuck together. Muta l'sochako, you can grind it or crush it. Ulufaro, crumble it. Baroshe etzbosav with your fingers. She'ein tchina achar tchina. Okay.
By the way, in South Africa also, everybody had a thing of snuff in their pocket, and they were using the snuff during davening.
Yeah, I remember that too.
And on you during the Chagim also.
The only thing that resembles it today is on Yom Kippur when we.
Yeah, Yom Kippur.
People
Go around. Chaim Eisenberg goes around to make brachas for Atzei Besamim and Mine Besamim.
Yeah, no, but they had snuff on Yom Kippur. They used to.
Yes, I'll tell you who used to bring this then. It was,
Yeah.
Where Chartsville?
No, at Yavne.
What happened again?
Oh no, what's his name? David Lunzer used to bring it. David Lunzer he used to bring around smelling.
What did he bring?
He had things to smell. He would come around and may have you make a bracha. I remember they would take an etrog and they would put like the peppercorn
Peppercorns in an etrog, yes.
in an etrog,
Peppercorn.
not a peppercorn.
In a etrog that was a year old.
It was the
It was
clothes.
You have to be hard.
Cloves. They would put cloves in an etrog
Gloves.
Gloves, correct.
and they would walk it around. Who? Genau.
With that. Yeah.
Yeah, and that had a special smell.
Mhm.
Okay, 113. We're moving on into our 39 malachos. We've done bishul, we've done borer, we've done tochein, we've done dash. Right, we did dash before tochein, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but dash before borer. And of course, the Mishnah, I think it's Ayin Gimel, Masechta Shabbos, that Mishnah in Klal Gadol, which goes through the 39 malachos. And this first list, it's the act of baking bread. Remember, because all of the malachos have to do with malachos in the Mishkan, and they bake the lechem aponim, right? So the next malach in the bread making process, following the malach of tochein, is lash, kneading. After grinding grain into flour, the malacha of lash involves mixing the flour with water and kneading it to form dough. In essence, this malacha is about the creation of a mixture of two or more substances to form one unit. It was performed when mixing the ingredients together to make the dyes for the mishkan. Not like for the lechem aponim, but for dye. In this year, we will discuss the definition and some of the practical applications of the malacha of lash. Lash is generally translated as kneading. The process of kneading consists of two stages: adding water to the flour, kneading the water and flour together by hand. Which of these two stages violates lash? Do you need to do both? Or if you only did one, is it not lash? So the Mishnah in Masechta Shabbos appears to identify lash as the second stage only, as it says that adding water to bran is permitted on Shabbos, as long as one does not need the mixture. Nostem mayim lemursa, you can add water to bran, avaloi goivlin, but you can't knead it. The Gemara points out that this point is in fact subject to a machlokes tanoim. The Mishnah represents the position of Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda. But according to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, simply placing flour into water, which is stage one, is already a biblical violation. Amrabaya. Amrita Kamei Mar. This sugi was spoken in front of Mar. That Masnis and Mani, who is the author of our Mishnah? Amrali, Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda. The Mishnah that said you could pour water into bran but not knead it is only Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda, Titania. Echad noisin zakemach ve'echad noisin sochomayim, ha'achron chayiv divrei Rebbe. So Rebbe says that, let's say some guy came and put into a dish flour, and then another guy came and poured water in, so the last person is chayiv, even without kneading, just adding the water. Rabbi Yosef ben Omer, eno chayiv ad sheyigbal. So Rabbi Yosef ben says you're not chayiv until you actually need it. So that's why Rabbi Yosef ben in the Mishnah that was quoted on Shabbos Chav Daled is just pouring water into flour is just stage one, doesn't lead to the problem of a malacha midaraisa. According to Rebbe, pouring the water creates the malacha as well. What's the final halacha? It's a subject to a dispute among the Rishonim. The Rif writes that since the view of Rabbi Yosef ben was taught in the Mishnah, that's the halacha. This same position is taken by the Rosh, Rambam, and many other Rishonim. The Rif says, Umidikatzinon, and since the Gemara ended up pointing out, when they asked who is the author of that Mishnah, it's Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda, right? Aliv Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda, Shema Mino, the Hilchos Kavose. The Rif, remember, the job of the Rif, the Rosh, and the Rambam, those are the three main codifiers that the Shulchan Orech relied on. And each sugya in the Gemara, those of us in the Daf Yomi know, each sugya ends, it's sometimes ambivalent. What is the halacha like? Sometimes it say Hilchos Kavose Dabaya. Sometimes it doesn't. It gives us two opinions. You don't know who the halacha is like. So the Rif, Rosh, and Rambam struggled mightily to have principles. If the machlokas between Rab Meir and another Tana, the halacha is always like Rab Meir. And one of the Gemaras gives us these rules. So sometimes we have rules like that. When you have debate between two Tanoim, we pass like this. Sometimes it's because, like here, the Gemara ended up saying, well, they quoted a Mishnah, and who was it like? Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda, and was unnamed, not in this Mishnah. The halacha is like this. So that's how the Rif posket. Now, Rav Eliezer of Mitz argues that based on a different rule, the halacha always follows Rabbi Yehuda Nasi when he disputes a single Tana, right? So here's where this comes in, that special Gemara which lists the various rules that when Rebbe argues with this guy, the halacha is like him, or whatever. And so Rabbi Eliezer of Metz, town in France, northern France, sort of in Germany. Today it's in Germany, but it was part of the Balei HaTosfos. They all lived in Metz. Rabbi Eliezer was one of them. And he said, he brought the Gemara that when Rabbi Yehuda Nasi disputes a single Tana, with the halacha follows Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Here too, one is liable merely for pouring water into flour. The way Rabbi said, he supports this position from another Mishnah as well, indicating that both Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel prohibit placing in water and flour biblically. This approach is taken as well by some Ashkenazi Rishonim, such as the Mordechai and the Sefer HaTruma. Now, Rabbi Eliezer Mitz wrote the Sefer Yereim, says Halash, Tolda in his mind below Taruvis Bekli. A tolda of the Melach of Lash is just pouring water into flour. Kidit b'Shabbos perek rishon Beis Shammai oimrim ein shorin dio d'samimonim elim ken yashrim bod yom. You can't soak the ink of the materials, the chemical, the samimonim, unless it was already soaked from the day before. Besil matir mafilu besil lo shor el mibod yom aval b'Shabbos asur. Even Besil doesn't permit to do it on Shabbos. Avagav this nan b'mishech noisnim mayim lemursim. It says in the Mishnah, you can put water into bran. Avalo goivlin. So l'chora, you're allowed to pour water. Lo yikamelan kavasa dechidoid. Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda. Look, min losam. We don't paskin like this das yochid, which was Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda. And v'halacha karebi mechavero. Oh, Beis Shammai Beis Hillel pligi alev perek rishon. Rabbi Eliezer was a student of Rabbeinu Tam, and the Rabbeinu Tam's brother, the Rashbam, These were the grandsons of Rashi. They're one of the earliest of the Balei Tosfos. Rav Eliezer's students was the Rav Yah. These were the Shum, Speyer, Worms, and Magens. The other Balei Tosfos, Rav Simcha, was in Speyer. Rav Elazar, the author of the Rokech, was in Worms, and Rav Baruch ben Shmuel Yisrael Balei Tosfos was in Magens. Rabbi Eliezer of Metz's best-known work is Sefer Yereim, which is a work on the 630 commandments, as counted by the Halachos Gedolos the Bahag. Although the work was originally published and distributed in abridged form, the full original text was published from manuscript in Vilna only in 1892. It's primarily a work of halacha, but it has comments and arguments surrounding ethics and proper service for Hashem. The Shulchan Aruch quotes the Rif and the Yereim. By the way, if we would be learning the Shulchan Aruch inside, this is what the Tzurba, how is the Tzurba creating all of this? If you have a halacha like the Shulchan Aruch, Ein Goivlin Mursel Behema, you don't need bran for an animal or chicken. Aval Noisim B'mayim, but you could pour water into the bran. That's like who? That's like Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. But Yesh Oisrim, Litin Maim Al Gabi Moisim B'Shabbos. But there are those who argue. Now, if we were opening up the Shulchan Aruch and learning it together, what would we do to delve deeper? So we would go to the tour. And the Beis Yosef commentary on the tour brings you all the sources that he eventually uses in the Shulchan Aruch. Now, the Meforshim in the Shulchan Aruch, like the Magen Avram, will not bring it usually. They might, but they usually won't. You'll have to go to the tour and the same siman, the Beis Yosef commentary on the tour will bring the Gemara and bring the Rif and bring the Yereim, and that's how you know how the Shulchan Aruch had an initial opinion, a stam, and a Yeshoisrim. Ramah, Ayle El Siman Shin Chafalev, Gabi Shum Chardal Ketzadot. He says, how should you treat mustard and garlic? For the sake of simplicity, we have not differentiated at this point between flour, bran, and other substances. Although in reality, there's a dispute as to whether Hilchos Lash applies on a biblical level to substances that do not form a dough. And we'll discuss this in the next section. The Mishnah Berurah explains the comment of the Ramah to mean that the practice of Ashkenazim is to be stringent. Yesh oisrim, hu das balatrumas, v'siato. The Sefer Truma rules in accordance with the opinion of the Sefer Yereim. So the Mishnah Berurah points out that one of the other Rishonim, the Balatrumas, and his group, Poiskin Karebi, they paskin like Rabbi Desfir Leidim Nesinis Maim L'chud Chayiv Mishum Gipul, that just pouring water alone you're chayiv for kneading, bekemach uvemorson, in flour or bran, uve'efer and ash, uvechol davar v'alkein tzarich shitin lav mayim b'ad yom. It's not just materials that form dough; it's really into anything. Ayin le'el simin ritzor lomar v'sham nizbar denogim lahachmer kisfars balatruma, that we are machmir. Some poskim, such as Ravadia Yosef, write that Sfardim, who usually follow the rulings of the Shulchan Aruch, may be lenient in this regard, based on a rule that the view quoted by the Shulchan Aruch without preface, some say, is accepted as halacha. And if it doesn't say Yeshomrim, and it was quoted as Stam, right? Ein Goivlin Mursin, it doesn't say Yeshomrim, but so it's accepted as halacha. But Rabbi Sin Abba Shol writes that even those who follow the rulings of the Shulchan Aruch should be stringent, since according to the second view, quoted by the Shulchan Aruch, adding liquid is a biblical malacha. So remember, they're using a principle if there's a machlokas. So we have a suffix, right? Where's a doubt? Who do we paskin like? Well, if the subject matter is a doraisa, we have a rule that governs it. Suffix doraisa is l'chumra. That's what he's using, right? If the whole issue was a rabbinic issue, and it's a suffix how we paskin, so you could be lenient because suffix Rabbanan is lakula. But since the malach of lash is a doraisa, and it's a suffix how we paskin, he says there's a tzad to be stringent. Right? Kivin shaladas sefer atrum of what rishonim also not Torah b'choloifen. Right? We have major rishonim. These are major rishonim who say that it's an instrument of Torah. Umoran hevitivrehem. Right? The Shulchan Aruch didn't ignore them completely. He brought him in a yesh oimrim. The divrehem lo mahani shinui. And even according to their views, it doesn't help if you do it with a shinui. You should not be lenient to rely on the Rambam, who allowed you to just pour water into dough. The Shmira Shabbos Kilchasa, Rav Neuwirth, rules accordingly that one may not pour liquid onto food or food into liquid if they will stick together of their own accord. If the mixture was already made before Shabbos, adding more liquid is permitted. It just makes the mixture thinner. Shnei chumrim, 2 materials. Shenis arvu v'nidbeku lifnei Shabbos. They got mixed up and they got stuck together before Shabbos. Mutter losif aleim mashka. You can add wine to it, or you can add fluid to it to soften it. You can even mix it. Keragel b'mosachol. Vein b'zeh mishum isur lisha. Avaloya arveiv. You should stir them gently. Ki b'nachas v'lo b'kol. V'lachein chemat botnim. Peanut butter. Shenifrad mimena shuma. The peanut butter and the oil got separated. V'hu tzaf al panea, and it's risen to the top. Lashuv lavar b'Shabbos. Mutter lashuv, you can mix it up on Shabbos. V'gam mutter lavrev b'mitz v'chadoma kedei l'dalolo. You can mix juice into it to thin it. You can't put other items in there. Could go gvina, racha, soft cheese, or riba, I guess, caramel. No, riba is jam. Ularva. The cheese sticks to the peanut butter. We'll conclude this by noting that preparing a mixture that still contains solid pieces in it and does not coalesce in one unit is not included within Lash. This is a Pnei Halacha. Od klal tzarech ladas. Melecha salisha hi melecha she magveshes es hachomer yavesh. You take dry materials and you bind it together. Sheyeh melukad. Aval im hachomer hayavesh mitpazer b'chomer hanozli. But if the dry ingredients spread through the liquid, so that's ein bazel lash. Accordingly, the Mishnah writes that adding liquids to salad is permitted, provided that the pieces are not small enough for the liquid to cause them to stick together. Uviyarek anikra salatin eladakli because kiven shein choitchin also dak. We don't cut it into very small pieces. We already learned, very small pieces is a problem with about tochein. Okay, I'm going to stop here today because we're not going to be able to finish this next section of types of mixtures, and we'll do Lash for a few weeks.
So this is an exception to the rule that the Shulchan Aruch follows the majority of the Rif, the Rush, and the Rambam.
Correct.
Okay.
He brought he brought it as the Stam opinion,
Right.
and then
As
he
the
brought the because there were a lot of. It was a situation where there were major Rishonim that had as a block that opposed that. So that's why he mentioned it. But you see, Rav Yosef says Sfardim can follow the Shulchan Aruch.
Right.
Okay. Any other comments?
No.
We're not doing next week.
I'm sorry. Next week is Rosh Hashanah. Everybody should
Right.
have sure. The following week